Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have full review of the OPPO Find N5. Let's get started. This is the most advanced foldable OPPO has and the thinnest foldable in the world today. Just at the time of recording this video, its launch price in Mexico has been $44,999. That's more or less $2,245, although remember that the prices here are not the same as there, but it is definitely a pretty high price, although curiously it is the cheapest. Of the foldable that are currently competing in Mexico, where there is the Honor Magic V3, the Huawei Mate X6, Galaxy Z Fold 6, and well, possible past generations that will surely be more competitive in price. Let's learn it step by step. What does this device bring to the table, considering Telcel is the sole official distributor in Mexico? From my perspective, this might be a downside, because the more distributors there are, the higher the chance of finding promotions or offers. However, in this scenario, it's exclusively through Telcel. Let's examine it more closely, step by step. Let's begin by discussing the design, which has truly impressed me significantly. The front of the device will feature relatively thin bezels. However, due to its folding design, we will notice a slightly asymmetrical look characterized by more pronounced corners. Rounded corners on the left. On the right side, the device feels comfortable to hold the hand, and I really like that. The hinge doesn't occupy much of the front space compared to some foldables, so it doesn't feel like a strange format. Often it feels like using a traditional phone. Here on this screen we have ultra-thin nanocrystalline glass, as OPPO calls it. It comes with a factory-applied screen protector, but it doesn't seem to have Gorilla Glass or anything similar. It should be resistant, but I don't plan to test it. To test, with the device folded, we'll find ourselves on the side. A switch called Alert Slider, which lets us switch in between vibration mode, silent mode, or sound mode, is designed with texture, allowing easy identification, making it an intriguing element for user experience. Additionally, the volume buttons are designed in a very thin format, alongside the fingerprint reader, which doubles as the power button, also in a thin format. This is because this device claims to be the thinnest folding device in the world today. At the top, we can see a small grill for sound, along with microphones and infrared capabilities for a universal remote control. In the hinge area, there are no ports or connections present, and unlike previous generations, it is not accompanied by any letters or similar markings. When at the bottom, we'll locate the tray. For the SIM card, which is in this particular one, the case has just one tray, since this is the model that it's available through Telcel in other countries, possibly with other distributors. The second tray for the SIM card will arrive unlocked. Additionally, we will discover another speaker grill, more microphone holes, and at last the USB-C port. It is important to note that these particular frames are indeed constructed from aluminum alloy, a Series 7 with an aerospace quality from. Therefore, the device is expected to possess a satisfactory level of rigidity. However, given that it is the world's thinnest folding device, it is likely to have some fragile areas. As reported in previous news, the hinge is constructed from a titanium and steel alloy known for its exceptional strength, achieving a resistance of 2,200 megapascals. This means that the hinge is designed to be extremely durable and long-lasting. And when you unfold the device, you will notice that the fold mark is barely visible, unlike other foldable phones. In fact, this cell phone is the first smartphone to receive the certification of minimized folds by TÜV. And they are truly right. The fold area is hardly noticeable. Obviously, it is not completely invisible, so from certain angles of light, you might be able to distinguish it. But trust me, while using the phone, you practically forget about it because it is so subtle of that fold mark. When the phone is unfolded, you will notice an area featuring ultra-thin glass, which is additionally protected by another layer of mica. By the way, you should definitely not remove this protective layer. In this unfolded state, the device measures a thickness of 4.21 millimeters, making it extremely and notably attractive. While when folded, it reaches with a thickness of 8.90 mm. It's nearly identical to traditional format devices. In this way, it has broken the barrier that separated foldables from regular devices. If you thought a foldable would be thicker or heavier, it's not. its weight is just 229, matching or lower. Compared to some traditional form factor devices, this one stands out. The back cover is crafted from a fiber of aircraft grade quality, according to what the manufacturer has reported. It has a smooth and soft texture when you touch it, however. Visually, it appears quite intriguing due to the light reflections. In this instance, I have the edition in a white fog shade, but it's also offered in a galactic black hue. Take note that in the camera module area, there's a noticeable relief, though not as pronounced as in some other devices. This design choice maintains a balanced weight, complemented by a small metal ring that adds an elegant touch to the camera of this particular device. By the way, we will not just find IPX6 and IPX8, but also IPX9, so the device is completely waterproof. It does not have any kind fear of such an accident. Then it is quite comprehensive in all these aspects. However, it lacks dust resistance, so you should be cautious and handle it carefully. If you'll use it nearby, in areas where there tends to be an excess of dust, overall this device stands out with its excellent design, appealing aesthetics, strong resistance, and impressive durability. The external screen measures 6.62 inches and has a 20.65 to 9 aspect ratio. While this ratio is not precisely the same as most traditional cell phones, it is quite similar, so it doesn't feel like an unusual experience or anything out of the ordinary. The resolution is Full HD and includes a very good level of detail, reaching 431 pixels per inch, and it provides us with an opportunity. Peak brightness reaches 2450 nits when watching HDR content. This support for HDR content provides significantly more realism, ensuring the screen is sharp, bright, and offers excellent color quality. Use it under the sunlight. It's comfortable since you have a great view. Good, although the lowest brightness from my taste falls a little short. Luckily, it provides a dimming rate of 2160 Hz, so if you're particularly sensitive to flicker that might be produced, you won't notice it. However, it lacks an additional dimming feature or an option to further reduce the brightness, making the lowest brightness level insufficient for me in extremely dark conditions. This screen is a mold and offers us various calibration modes. Color, the natural mode. The recommended mode is something I like, but the vivid mode provides us with colors that are more intense and vibrant. Additionally, it includes a manual adjustment feature for the screen's color temperature. If you prefer, it also offers an adaptive tone option that automatically adjusts the screen's temperature or white balance to better match the surrounding environment, which I personally find very appealing. Of course, it also includes other view care modes with filters that can be activated automatically and similar features, plus a tool to enhance content resolution. What you see on screen. Even though it is initially turned off by default, there is another feature designed to enhance color and visualize content with an HDR style, even if the videos were not originally recorded in HDR. Both of these options are turned off by default. Additionally, the internal screen measures 8.12 inches, providing us with excellent amplitude, serving as a reference point. A screen much wider. We find in Samsung's Galaxy Z Fold 6, it offers us a 9.9:9 ratio, that is to say more or less square, with a resolution called as QXGA+, which is 2480 x 2248 pixels. The density is 412 pixels per inch. It offers us a level of detail that is quite similar to what we observe on the external display, and in both screens we observe a rate of upgrade from 1 to 120 Hz, ensuring that we also provide excellent fluidity while viewing content. This internal screen is slightly smaller, with brightness reaching 2100 nits compared to the external screen. It's still very bright. Plus, the mica helps reduce reflections well, making outdoor viewing comfortable. It also offers the same display modes, eye care, and adaptive tone functions we've seen on the screen. This internal screen also supports HDR, allowing you to view the contents with great realism. However, like the external screen, from my perspective, the minimum brightness isn't quite low enough, and the extra dimming option doesn't help much either. These screens are excellent, but I would only ask for the ability to reduce the brightness even further. As for sound, the experience is quite positive. While it may not be the most advanced audio we've seen in the industry, it still provides sound. Stereo speakers provide a great sound quality and wide sensation, but where they might lack in the volume and in the presence of bass frequencies, although the truth I can get to understand because it is an ultra slim folding. So in this sense, if you still perceive a small difference between a traditional format device and a folding one, that would be a major challenge for future generations. We must consider that in terms of software, add-ons are reserved for when you use headphones. We will find, for example, functions such as reality audio, which is something very similar. To Dolby Atmos, we also have spatial audio with headphones and a 10-band graphic equalizer, but only when using headphones and activating the music profile. So it's somewhat concealed and with a bit of duplicity because in addition to the spatial audio with headphones, you have another section called holo audio, which also seems to be focused on this kind of spatial sound coming from different directions and more. But well, it's not something as advanced as I would like. I think I would love to have the equalizer available for the speakers. And remember also that it doesn't include headphone jack, but fortunately it does include very high resolution codecs like LHDC, aptX, aptX adaptive, and LDAC. So if you want to enjoy your music at very high resolution, you can have headphones with these codecs and you're going to be able to take advantage of them here. If you want zero latency, you will need headphones with USB-C or an adapter. Regarding the microphones, I was surprised because it has 5 microphones in total. In fact, it seems a bit overkill to me, but that's what OPPO has decided to incorporate. It's possible that by holding the device in various ways, you might end up covering some of the microphones, and that could explain why there are so many microphones included in total. Now let's listen to a test.
Esta es una prueba grabada con los micrófonos del OPPO Find N5.
One good thing is that in the voice recorder settings, there is an option to select directional audio. This means it will only utilize the microphones located at the top, so it won't capture all the sounds from this side. In the settings, there is also an option called Clear Voice that allows you to eliminate noise when you are making calls, which could also be useful. Next, let's test how it behaves in very noisy scenarios. I find that it controls its gain very well to avoid unwanted saturation. So if you like to record concerts or noisy scenarios, there is no problem. And to close with this section, the haptic motor to generate the vibration is on the x-axis, so it does give you a feeling of small bumps in the hand. Instead of a simple vibration, although by the fact of being foldable, it seems to me that it does not have an intensity as high as we see in traditional format devices. Fortunately, in this case, OPPO in the settings allows you to adjust the intensity of this vibration, and OPPO is one of the manufacturers that most takes advantage of this type of engine to give a more premium feedback when you control other aspects. For example, when manipulating the brightness in the control center, you will perceive how the device emits a very subtle vibration, as well as when you are moving between recent applications and other elements. Overall, the system gives off a premium feel in this aspect. This device is equipped with 2 front cameras, one on the exterior and one on the interior, yet both are identical, boasting 8 megapixels, an f2.4 aperture and a fixed focus. The external camera is centered at the top while the internal camera is positioned in the upper right corner. This device enables a rapid camera launch by pressing the volume button twice, provided that. If your device is locked, you will be able to access the camera quickly. However, if the device is unlocked, you might not access the camera as swiftly, which could slightly affect the user experience. It's important to note that the front camera offers a good shutter speed. In fact, it doesn't freeze at all, so if you enjoy taking fast pictures, you will find it quite suitable for that purpose. The front camera lacks burst mode but offers a palm gesture for easy capture. You'll find color filters, some highlighted in orange and others traditional. There's also a beauty mode with various facial effects. Each parameter has its own intensity setting and there's a large list of parameters to adjust. This is what it would look like if all the effects were set to the maximum level, just in case you need to see it that way. An important feature of a foldable is the capability to use the rear camera system for taking selfies. To make use of this feature, you should press the button located in the upper left corner once. You press this button, see that the device? It will prompt you to deploy it and you simply perform this action, and then you're done. Now, you are using the main system which provides you with a significantly higher quality. We will observe this shortly in the results. However, when you utilize this mode, it persistently detects the palm of your hand, along with all the options that are available. Additionally, the results with the front camera aren't very impressive. The colors appear somewhat pale, which I personally didn't love. Although the texture is good, the lack of autofocus means it misses out on many functions. The amplitude level is quite good, allowing you to be well framed with landscapes. However, since it doesn't have a fixed focus, you can't really show details of your face or display something up close to the audience effectively. Notice how the picture elevates it. It's impressive that when you use the rear system with the device deployed, the color accuracy is significantly improved. We achieve a completely new level of detail, and you can also utilize the ultra-wide camera for an even more impressive framing, whether it's a landscape or anything you want to capture in the background. Additionally, the device allows you to make use of the telephoto camera, offering a different perspective, and you can even showcase very close details of your face. Great for skincare creators or similar. In backlit scenes, note that the preview aims to optimize the outcome. Let's say it's good in terms of light and shadow balance, but I insist that the front camera has inaccurate colors. This same test done with the main camera from the preview gives us something far superior because no burnt areas are visible, and as you see, the color is much more accurate and it handles backlighting great. Even with the ultra-wide camera, the backlight is handled in a good way, although the colors are not as accurate as in the main camera. In indoor scenes, the front camera performs better in terms of colors, although it still does not have such a high level of detail. With the main camera, notice how the details are increased, giving a much more professional feel to your selfies. And of course, with the ultra-wide camera, you gain a wider framing, while maintaining a good color rendition. A good level of detail at night. I find it curious that the front camera has not performed as poorly as I expected. It looks like a dark, natural scene, but with just enough light to bring out the details and colors. Honestly, I really like the front camera in these scenarios, but again, the main camera used with the device deployed for selfies gives a much more appealing result for the level of detail it achieves, as well as more accurate colors. And with the ultra-wide camera, we again have a very good result, but with greater range. When watching scenes with backlighting at night, the front camera once more reveals a slight weakness, displaying a poor level of detail. Therefore, if you utilize the device equipped with the main camera, you will notice an improvement in photo quality in these particular scenarios. While it appears the beard has been enhanced slightly using artificial intelligence, it doesn't look as odd as with other cell phones. However, it still seems like the photograph doesn't maintain a 100% natural focus. If you use the ultra-wide camera against the backlight, you'll also achieve a good result. However, where you'll notice an even more pronounced difference is in portrait photography. It's important to note that the front camera provides a very poor level of detail, so it's not recommended for taking portrait pictures. On the other hand, if you use the main camera with the device unfolded, the result is truly spectacular. There is a portrait that has very impressive detail with excellent edge detection, vibrant color, and well-balanced lighting. It's truly remarkable. And while discussing portraits, it's important to mention that the front camera struggles to maintain objects in focus effectively. In this daytime test, however, the bokeh effect generated in the background is quite appealing, yet I must emphasize the results are not very impressive. If you switch to using the main camera with the device unlocked, the quality improves significantly, even in terms of object detection. Watch. Here's another example with an even more complex object. If you keep it focused, even with highlights and shadows on a face, the device handles it well. With the device deployed, you can use other zoom settings, though the framing becomes more complex. It's interesting that this option is available. Observe the change with the front camera. It struggles to maintain focus on objects, and the colors appear less vibrant. Therefore, as with any foldable device, it's best to unfold it and use the rear cameras for selfies. On the back, there are 3 cameras. First, the ultra-wide with 15mm focal length, 8 megapixels, f2.2 aperture, autofocus, and optical stabilization. And next, the 23mm main camera with f1.8 aperture, 50 megapixels, optical stabilization, and autofocus. Finally, the 70mm mini telephoto with f2.7 apertures, 50 megapixels, autofocus, optical stabilization, and macro capabilities. It's worth noting the photographic system is advanced, though the ultra-wide camera appears to have declined compared to the last generation, which hasn't been much of an issue. OPPO seems to have prioritized it. To maintain a lightweight device and ensure that the camera module isn't too prominent, I understand the approach. However, I believe we wouldn't have minded if the module had protruded a bit more, especially if it meant achieving a higher photo quality. Additionally, it's important to mention that OPPO utilizes the sensors in various ways, such as cropping them to provide us with different focal lengths. For instance, when I press the 1x button again, I notice it offers me slightly closer focal lengths. The identical situation will occur with the 3x button. where we achieve another focal length due to the crop within the sensor. This provides a really pleasant experience. It's important to notice that it also offers an excellent response speed. The device never freezes at any point. Actually, during our tests while attempting to capture number 3, we observed that it somehow attempts to predict the exact moment of your capture, so you don't need to worry too much about taking it at the precise moment. When it comes to the burst feature, you'll observe that it takes over half a second to initiate, and there is a notable gap between each picture. This is because by default the camera operates in a high-quality burst mode. You'll find this option in the settings, so if your priority is a very rapid burst, you can switch to the classic burst mode. However, if your focus is on the image quality, you can opt for the sharp burst mode. Personally, I find it quite appealing. The user can select the burst. Sharp allows a maximum of up to 50 photos. Notice how, in this instance, when you click on the photo mode, you can access other color interpretations. These can be extremely useful in particular environments. For example, if you're taking pictures in certain scenarios, sometimes cell phones get confused. They might perceive the environment as too dark and increase the exposure excessively, which results in the stage lights losing their prominence. This mode prevents that from happening. The same applies to silhouette mode, where the majority of smartphones will increase the exposure to prioritize illumination. A body or face, but you want a silhouette photo, you can select this option, and the same for fireworks. So these are very specific modes that enhance the mobile photography experience. Here we are also going to have available the same filters that we saw for the front camera, and we also have available the facial retouching. But in this case, with a single parameter, if we touch on screen, we can adjust the exposure and focus, as well as lock it completely, and curiously also offers us the exposure compensation setting located at the top is useful once more for somewhat dark scenes, where some cell phones tend to overexpose the results excessively and also alter the colors. If you desire more advanced controls, you can enter the main mode, which I believe the translation is not entirely accurate, but here you have parameters to adjust. The ISO up to 30,200, shutter speed up to 30 seconds, compensation, focus and white balance, as well as options at the top. We'll determine if you want a JPG or RAW photo. Note, we'll find another button to open more controls like contrast, saturation, color temperature, tint and sharpness. We can choose to use a vignette for darker edges. The menu also lets us display the histogram for advanced photography info. And regarding the intelligent functions, it's important to note that when you focus on a document, it doesn't show any kind of immediate reaction. However, we have the option to switch to the specific document scanner mode. In this mode, it assists us by detecting the document's edges. Additionally, it has the capability to translate certain documents, which is a new feature. I really appreciate that it allows us to continuously add more pages, which proves to be quite useful. Actually, you have the option to attach photos that you've already taken before, and once you're finished with that, you click Next. This feature lets you adjust the crop if it hasn't been detected properly. It also gives you the option to apply a black and white optimization to make it resemble a photocopy. Additionally, you can rotate or delete certain pages. Once you're satisfied, you click Save, and you should note that it can be saved either as an image or as a PDF. Therefore, the scanner is quite effective for handling codes. QR. Please note that from the main camera interface, you are also able to perform this action without needing to open another application or switching to another mode. Let's take a look at the results. The ultra-wide camera appears to be of good quality to me, however. It doesn't quite meet what we anticipated in such a pricey device. We would prefer a camera of even higher quality, as in this instance, there is a slight chromatic aberration, and most importantly, the colors are not as accurate as they should be. The main camera, on the other hand, improves the colors by providing a more accurate saturation and also defines the contrast well, making it a camera of excellent quality, with a good level of detail and without any distortion in the... It also lets us take pictures with other focal lengths, such as 28 or 35mm, even 46mm, where we would already find 2x zoom, and in this case it seems that it is able to maintain optical quality, giving us a good feeling of short-range zoom. Then we come to the 70mm camera, where again we lose a bit of color saturation, a bit of contrast. It seems that it does not maintain an equal consistency in colors between the three cameras, but again, it maintains the same quality. A very good level of detail, and we could still classify it as a short-range zoom, yet we continue to see an excellent photographic quality. Additionally, by applying cropping, it allows us to achieve 85 min photographs, or in this case, observe with 5x zoom photographs. It still maintains excellent quality, and here we could already classify it as a medium-range zoom, and it looks very good. Now observe another small gallery and carousel of photographs from various focal lengths simply, so you can see how it's going to have an excellent level of detail. In this case, we reached the 10x zoom with 230 mm, and we still see a good level of detail. Notice that the texts are also going to be optimized in a good way. This is the photograph with zoom 30x, and in text you will notice a good optimization. Now you are looking at the photograph with 60x zoom, and the device allows you to get to 120x digital zoom. Obviously, it will do a lot of optimization to try to recover the details in letters. Is quite noticeable. Now, let's take a look at a carousel of these types of photos with faces, so you can observe how the optimization in the ultra-long range zoom isn't as high in these kinds of photos compared to text photos. However, notice that in this particular case, with 10x zoom photographs, we observe a sufficiently good quality. But at 30x, which is the maximum I would consider for everyday use, we no longer see good quality. Instead, we see a photograph that's a bit cloudy or blurred. In this sense, it doesn't appear to have very good long-range zoom capabilities. Obviously, if you continue zooming in, even though the device lets you go much further, the image becomes extremely blurry, and it is not advisable to use it. We still had uncertainties about whether the device was showing some issue, so we repeated a very similar test, once more with pictures from different focal lengths. I would say that even at 10x, the picture still appears with a positive level of detail, but beyond that, once again, we began to notice cloudy and very low detail results. So keep in mind that this device provides us with good quality zoom from 0.6 to 10. However, I must mention that this primarily affects faces. But if you capture a photo with 120x zoom on an object with perhaps more defined lines or more distinct textures, the device can attempt to optimize it in a better way. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera performed more accurately in color. Note the curious result, the center photo has different color from the edges. Not bad, it's positive for indoors. The main camera had paler colors in these indoor scenes, but we have excellent detail. And when using the 46mm crop, we observe very good quality. The same goes for the 70mm telephoto camera, where the color rendition was definitely more accurate. It maintained good detail and controlled noise well, even in indoor settings. It's important to note that the 5x zoom photography still retains good quality with an outstanding level of detail. That's why I emphasize that at short to medium zoom, even indoors, we achieve good quality. During nighttime, the ultra-wide camera has shown impressive performance, effectively managing noise in the dimmer areas. Although there remains some graininess present, it's important to consider that this is the ultra-wide camera. It's positive. The device also manages the most illuminated areas very well, and in this particular case, I have to mention that there is virtually no noticeable difference whether you choose to use the night mode or not. This is because the device, even in its automatic mode, handles the photographs exceptionally well. The main camera significantly enhances its quality, especially in terms of definition and clarity, which is once again evident. It controls the most illuminated areas proficiently and lights up the darkest areas effectively, while also keeping noise in check. As a result, the photography is truly excellent. Even with the 46mm crop, we observe good quality in the photograph regarding lighting, but unlike during the day here, it doesn't seem to maintain optical quality. Therefore, you don't see a photograph with such natural detail. Using the 70mm telephoto camera, the result is truly spectacular. I love how the darker area appears very clean with good detail, and the more illuminated area is free from overexposures, even with the 6x zoom setting. By the way, in all the past instances I was mentioning, 5x but it is 6x, this 139mm setting, we see excellent picture quality even at night the device performs well at. Different focal lengths, which is very outstanding, and if there is no lighting at all in your frame, watch. This would give us the main camera. As a first impression, it would seem that the darkest area is overexposed, but I must tell you that this was a cloudy day and the sky, if it looked like that, we did not see complete darkness, so the result. I like that it has a good saturation of colors. The ultra-wide camera also has a good behavior for the cloudy environment. It has a little more difficulty still in this area, and it seems to me that it has solved it in a good enough way, and zooming in this case, it will give full priority to the digital zoom, so it will not use the telephoto camera if the environment is very dark, so that in the 6x zoom setting, we will no longer see a good image quality. As we observed in other areas where there is greater illumination, for backlit shots, it's important to note that the preview with the main camera appears fine, but when using the ultra-wide or telephoto settings, it may look overexposed. However, the final result is likely to be positive. With the ultra-wide camera, be aware that the only downside is that in the transitions between highlights and shadows, a slight glow effect might be created, which isn't very appealing, but it does achieve a good overall balance of highlights and shadows with good color, saturation, and good contrast. The main camera is nearly flawless here. We found no negatives. Even when cropping or zooming from different focal lengths, including the telephoto camera, it excels in backlit conditions. For macro photography, there are several options. Here's the result with the ultra-wide camera, which has autofocus, allowing you to get relatively close to objects. Personally, I'm not very fond of the perspective. This is about as close as you can get with the main camera. Clearly, due to the depth of field, it creates more blur in the background areas, which helps to better highlight the macro foreground, making it look nice. However, if you crop inside the sensor to zoom in 2 times, I believe the perspective improves significantly. And take note that in this particular case, the telephoto camera does indeed have macro capabilities, allowing it to focus closely on this type of object. In fact, it provides a very good level of detail, although the focus may not be completely uniform. However, for macro photography, I believe it is excellent. He also points out that if you apply cropping within the sensor to reach the 6 times zoom, the result will be even more spectacular, especially in terms of the level of detail it can achieve with very small objects. I want to remind you that this is the small object we are capturing in the picture, and this gives us an excellent level of detail for macro photography. Now, if you prefer to be far away instead of being close, this is where the ultra-wide camera comes into play, offering you the widest perspective possible with this camera. Moving on to the panoramic mode, which I personally think is of intermediate quality. It does provide a good range, but it's important to note that it operates in a fairly low-resolution panoramic mode. It lacks detail and doesn't seem to have as much contrast as traditional photos. I wasn't impressed with the panoramic mode either. It even causes some chromatic aberration. Fortunately, it allows us to use the ultra-wide camera for more amplitude. For moving scenes in good lighting, there's no need to activate a special mode, as the camera performs well. Except for the telephoto camera, which has a more closed aperture, it's important to note that even in good lighting conditions, it might produce a slightly blurred result. However, the device includes an action mode that prioritizes the shutter speed to prevent the pictures from being blurred, offering a chance for improvement. This is especially noticeable in indoor photography. Keep in mind that in motion scenarios, it can be a bit challenging when there isn't much lighting available. If you activate the action mode, you can somewhat prevent sweeping movements. However, with a slower shutter speed, it also loses some detail level when trying to reduce noise, because in this case, it will use a much higher ISO, which can generate more noise. So it really depends on what you prefer. With the telephoto camera, you will notice this effect much more, because you will see that the movements appear extremely swept if you don't have the action mode enabled. If you enable action mode, the movements will appear more clearly defined. However, I must insist that the level of detail might be slightly reduced. I appreciate that this option can be turned on or off according to your preference. Let me remind you that this device also features a high-resolution mode, which allows us to capture photos with all the sensor's information. Nevertheless, the level of detail might not look as appealing, as it seems not very well optimized in this aspect. If you get a little closer, you might notice you can still maintain good detail, but if you want to get much closer, the result can appear quite artificial. With the telephoto camera, you also have this high-resolution mode available, allowing you to zoom in and crop your photo while still maintaining a good level of resolution. And finally, let's take a look at some portrait shots. Notice that with the main camera in these types of ultra-complex scenarios, we don't see excellent 100% performance, as there are some areas that it doesn't manage to keep well focused. With the 35mm setting, still using the main camera, we see a very similar result. Fortunately, good detail on the face, but not very good foreground detection. With the 46mm setting, the same thing happens because it still uses the main camera, but interestingly, with the 70mm setting, it even gets worse. So, the portrait photography, I would say, is not so good quality because of the fact that it is not so accurate in detecting the foreground in scenarios. It's quite complex. For instance, I want to point out another picture here where once more there was a failure in detecting the foreground objects. And in this other picture, it presents us with an exceptionally professional and appealing bokeh effect. In that regard, the result is quite pleasing. In fact, it also demonstrated improved accuracy in identifying the foreground objects. However, once again, the accuracy isn't as close to what one would expect from a high-end device. I haven't been satisfied with this phone's portrait photography. A positive is it allows portraits up to 85mm for a more professional look. If there aren't many nearby objects or they're simple, results can be good. But for the price, portraits fall short. When it comes to video recording, we will discover that K to 60 frames per second is available for both the main camera and the telephoto camera. However, the front camera and the ultra-wide camera are limited to K to 30 frames per second. This makes it quite clear that OPPO has not equipped every single camera with the top-notch features. The resolution selector is adequately provided. Simple and user-friendly, remember that. When we are recording a video, we will easily have access to the slider for zooming, and in addition to that, we will also find a button. Press to take photos, another to pause, and continue with the video. However, we cannot switch to the front camera. We do have the option to turn on the flashlight whenever we want, and we can also enable noise cancellation dynamically if needed. Additionally, we will discover that there are color filters available. However, keep in mind that these filters cannot be used in 4K resolution. If a filter is selected, the resolution will decrease. The same situation applies to the beauty mode, which is available but only for videos in full HD resolution. We also find the exam compensation setting, useful exposure in dark scenarios, and action mode for scenes with a lot of movement, and also a button to activate the depth, or field mode, or cinema mode, or portrait mode, however you want to know it, but it blurs the background. We will see in a moment its results. By default, it does not record in HDR, but it does have a button to turn this option on with Dolby Vision. And just as it happens in photography, here we find other smart scene presets for very specific recording. In this case, the Pro mode is hidden with the name of Movie mode, where curiously the device completely changes the ratio of the video. That's something I personally don't like. I would prefer the video to remain in 16:9. But, well, here you already have some manual parameters to modify your video recording. Here, you're viewing an example recorded at 60 frames per second to showcase its capabilities. However, the rest of the clips will be at 30 frames per second. Note that you can switch to the telephoto camera, and it maintains the same fluidity and detail level, resulting in a positive outcome. The ultra-wide camera struggles with focusing in these conditions, making it a less ideal choice for recording. It still struggles with managing color correctly and stably. The main camera greatly improves with stable focus, accurate colors, and good contrast, making it a recommended choice for videos. The telephoto camera alters colors slightly but retains detail, so OPPO needs to optimize video recording for a better experience, consistent across its 3 lenses. When it comes to indoor scenarios, the ultra-wide camera faces even more challenges. The color can appear a bit pale at times, and interestingly, we don't encounter as many focus issues here as we do outdoors. However, the color does seem to remain quite pale. The main camera shows an improvement in overall detail, yet it still struggles somewhat to accurately interpret color in these types of indoor scenarios. And interestingly, the telephoto camera seems to me to have performed the best on color in these types of tests, but it confirms to us that it doesn't have a consistent feel across all 3 cameras. In backlit scenarios, fortunately, it seems to balance highlights and shadows well, although with the ultra-wide camera it has more difficulties, so you might find some burnt areas when it is giving priority to illuminate the face well. Fortunately, there is no aggressive jump in exposure, but if you notice that the ultra-wide camera is of low quality in the video recording, as it has little detail. Despite being a video in 4K, you notice immediately when you switch to the main camera because it manages color better and the level of detail is increased. In terms of how it handles backlight, I find it to be a good performer because there are no aggressive jumps in exposure or overexposed areas. Even when using the telephoto camera, we still observe a satisfactory performance. However, it's worth noting that faces might appear a bit darker than our ideal preference. Yet I think it's entirely understandable, given that it's a light and shadow area and it still performs well. The device indeed has HDR recording capabilities, although these are turned off by default. At this moment, you're viewing an HDR video that has been converted to SDR. In this scenario, it seems to me that it manages the interplay of light and shadow quite effectively with the ultra-wide camera, actually. The color looks a bit more natural to me. When switching to the main camera, there was overexposure, but it was only at the moment of switching, because afterwards it was better controlled. It seems to me that it would be recommended to record in HDR for this type of complex scenarios, but to reproduce it you need compatible monitors. In this case, I insist that you are seeing a conversion to SDR. In fact, the device can automatically convert HDR content to SDR when you are going to share it. So, in these kinds of scenarios, I strongly recommend that you activate HDR. At night, once again, it becomes evident that the ultra-wide camera is somewhat lacking in quality. It feels like a camera from a much more affordable cell phone. Therefore, in this regard, it still falls short compared to what we typically observe in traditional format cell phones. The camera truly leaves a lot to be desired, particularly in the darkest areas and when there is noticeable backlighting. However, the main camera shows significant improvement as it is no longer as noticeable. He also has a lot of noise and flicker that is generated with the ultra-wide camera, keeping the details better. And in the darker areas, it raises the illumination, but without looking artificial, although the color saturation seems to me a little low. And where we will find a curious performance will be with the telephoto camera, because if you're aiming at an area with sufficient illumination, it will make the camera change, and honestly, I love the result, not only in the illuminated area, but even in the areas where the camera is not very bright. The stabilization offered by the ultra-wide camera is indeed quite positive, whether you're walking or running. Obviously, those sharp movements tend to disappear in intermediate lighting conditions and also in darker areas. It provides me with a result that feels very natural, and trust me, it looks quite similar to what you'd see in real life under those levels of darkness. It manages to maintain good color saturation, which is something I truly appreciate. However, if you attempt to switch the camera directly in these darker areas, you'll notice that it prioritizes using the digital zoom, which unfortunately is of very poor quality in such scenarios. This results in a lot of overexposure and really poor color saturation. So, if you want to use the telephoto camera in dark scenes, you need to first point it towards an area with some light to make the switch, and then move to the darker area you want to capture. It performs this with really impressive quality. Personally, I dislike that OPPO prioritizes digital zoom, as it results in very low quality images. The stabilization with the ultra-wide camera is quite positive, whether you're walking or running. Although jerky movements are noticeably reduced, it's somewhat challenging to notice, but it manages to compensate quite effectively. The main camera performs well in stabilization while you're walking. However, when you're running, you might notice slightly more aggressive compensation movements, especially if the movement is very intense. Despite this, I believe the stabilization functions quite well overall. Even the telephoto camera stabilizes effectively for smoother movements, such as when walking. Therefore, the overall impression regarding this parameter is positive. On a positive note, it also offers a higher stabilization mode that remains compatible with 4K resolution. It's important to note that the ultra-wide camera is perfect for these scenarios, as it handles sudden movements very effectively even when running. The main camera also performs exceptionally well in this mode, enhancing the most abrupt compensation movements. Interestingly, it also lets us use the telephoto camera with action mode, which is a feature that few devices offer. The zoom movement is somewhat curious. If you attempt to move fluidly, you'll notice that pauses are inevitably generated. This happens because the device enforces pauses when cycling through presets like 0, 6, 1 or 3x, so it feels a bit unusual. You can't achieve a perfectly smooth zoom like you might find in other devices. However, the level of detail remains quite good, especially for a foldable device. The ultra-wide camera already commented that it has a bit of instability in the focus and notes that it does not react very fast in aggressive movements. Definitely in that regard should improve. The main camera reacts better for this type of effects and even in more subtle movements. Also, the focus is adjusting with a good speed. And the telephoto camera, curiously, also has a good behavior, having something much more complex due to all the travel that must be done. It does focus well, and it does so quite quickly. Even with subtle movements, it adjusts in a satisfactory manner. However, I wasn't too fond of the fast motion mode. On the plus side, it includes stabilization. The most basic speed setting is at 15x, which might be a bit quicker than preferred for those who are moving or walking. Thankfully, it supports 4K resolution. The fast motion mode is particularly advantageous for capturing landscapes, as it enables us to reach up to 1900x, allowing us to recording plant growth, as I mentioned, in 4K with excellent image quality. Additionally, it offers slow motion modes like here, where we see full HD at 240 frames per second, providing clear movement and good resolution, allowing for extended recording. Alternatively, we can switch to 480 frames per second for slower motion, though the resolution decreases to HD. So, in my opinion, the slow motion on this device isn't quite as impressive as what we observe on some other high-end devices. These other devices manage to maintain excellent slow motion quality even at a high resolution. Finally, it's important to mention that this device also offers a portrait recording mode, which blurs the background. However, it's in full HD, so the level of detail isn't as high. If there's not too much movement, the result is quite positive. But it's important to note that even when you show your hands or turn around without, displaying the face still keeps a nice blur effect. As you move away, the blur effect diminishes, offering a natural and positive outcome, though it can become slightly confused when walking or being near an object, where the device might focus on the background and blur the foreground. In this aspect, it doesn't behave as pleasantly, making it ideal for more static scenes but with more. I believe it doesn't perform quite as well as it does with other objects in the foreground. By the way, it also lets us apply some zoom. However, it's digital zoom, so while it offers a telephoto perspective, the detail level is quite low. When it comes to recording selfie-type videos, the front camera again won't be highly recommended. The image quality appears very basic even though it's 4K. The color and contrast are quite low, Fortunately, it maintains a good level of stabilization, but note that the result in backlit areas is lousy, so it is a bad idea to record with the front camera of the cell phone. If you record in selfie mode with the device deployed, note that you would have a better quality. In this case, with the ultra-wide camera, you have very good amplitude, so you do not have to stretch your arm so much to get a good framing, although the best image quality is in the main camera, but since it is closer, you really need to stretch your arm quite a bit, and remember that it might feel strange to be looking up at the screen. So, if you want to come out well, move towards the camera. Interestingly, it also allows us to use the 3x camera, which I insist, for beauty content creators or something similar, would be very attractive to show ultra-close details. But take note of how in backlit scenarios, with the rear camera system, it performs significantly better, unlike what we observed with the front camera, where the illuminated area had been completely burned, results in the image quality being much higher when you opt for using the rear camera system instead. Indoors, the result will have a lower level of detail and a bit more noise when using the front camera. This is in addition to the obvious challenges presented by recording against the light. However, while using the rear camera system, we will encounter better quality. Even though the color interpretation in this case has been somewhat, the area with backlighting has been managed in a much more suitable manner. When you switch to ultra-wide in these types of indoor scenarios, we observe a detail similar to what was visible with the front camera, but it performs better against backlight. At night, it confirms what we've been mentioning. The front camera performs poorly, with significant noise causing even flickering reddish or green hues, especially in the darker areas where it will be more noticeable. The noise remains low in detail, which creates the impression of a camera with much lower quality than what you might expect for this price range. However, when you switch to the rear camera, you'll notice a significant improvement. The noise is much better controlled and there's a noticeable enhancement in the level of detail, although it's important to mention that if there's more movement, the video will still lose some detail. Nevertheless, the quality is far superior compared to what the front camera offers. Even in night scenes with backlighting, the results are quite positive, although if you switch over to the ultra-wide camera to achieve a wider frame, you'll notice that the quality is definitely reduced once more, and there's a significant amount of noise present again. Therefore, it is not a device I would consider to be very good for video recording, especially in this kind of selfie format. In this situation, it's going to offer us the fast camera mode here as well, using the front camera, with the same settings that we saw for the main camera. However, it does not provide us with the option for slow motion using the front camera. However, if you unfold the device once more, you will be able to take advantage of the main camera system to record these types of slow motion scenes while in selfie mode. With the front camera, the portrait recording mode is available, which blurs the background, and I believe the result looks quite natural. Even when you show your hand, it appears well. Interestingly, it manages to keep some objects in focus, although the backlit performance is rather poor, and at times the effect can also be. You have the option to deactivate it, although the behavior when it detects the foreground might be somewhat unsettling. If it senses a hand close to an object or holding it, it may maintain focus, but otherwise it will be entirely out of focus. Additionally, it integrates the dual recording mode using both the rear and front cameras simultaneously, offering various modes. In this instance, it is the circular picture in picture mode, and it's important to note that it allows us to reposition this small floating circle, even though with. On the rear camera, there's a stop located on the right side, which keeps the autofocus feature enabled while also allowing the ability to zoom. Although the video is in full HD and it lets you zoom, it doesn't change dynamically. On the rear camera lenses, you also have the same picture in picture mode. It displays with a rectangle and behaves in exactly the same manner. However, you have to stop and then start recording again if you wish to switch between these modes. Additionally, there is the split screen mode, allowing both cameras to be displayed at equal size. In this mode, we cannot adjust the size of each box individually. However, you still have the option to use autofocus and zoom capabilities. Furthermore, it is possible to enlarge the front camera while having the rear camera in picture mode, maintaining the same functionality. Remember, if you wish to switch between these modes, you'll need to stop the recording and then restart it. This device is equipped with Android 15 and also operates on Color OS 15, meaning we have the latest versions from both OPPO and Google, which is definitely a positive aspect. Additionally, it offers a policy of 4 years of software updates along with 5 years of security patches. However, it must be noted that this is somewhat lacking, particularly when considering the high cost associated with it. While I do believe that 4 years is a pretty good lifespan in a general context, it is clear that for such a high price, more could be expected. We can ask them to have a policy of more years of updates. Let me tell you some of the features that come in this operating system, as for example, it comes with a feature called Flow Themes, which notes that allow us to have a good level of customization on the lock screen. We can add some widgets indicators. change the style of the clock, and also change the typography. Additionally, we can choose styles to blur the wallpaper or add effects like crystalline. The lock screen customization level is decent, though not the industry's most advanced. We can change the lock or home screen background and apply effects separately. Note that we can also customize how the device behaves when it is deployed, and similar to other Android devices, it gives us the ability to modify the system's color palette or extract colors directly from our wallpaper. Additionally, it lets us swiftly alter the shape of the icons on our home screen. We can also apply different effects to the icons of third-party applications, resize them, and do much more. Furthermore, the device includes the always-on display feature, which allows you to see the clock even when your device is locked. You have two different modes to choose from. One is a fluid mode that enhances the transitions between the always-on display screen and the lock screen. You'll notice there's a transition that looks quite attractive. Alternatively, you can opt for the classic style, which will just display a clock in the center that shifts position slightly. Additionally, there are some settings available to customize what information you want to see in this mode. By default, this feature will be disabled when the device is turned off. It appears to be in use, or you can choose to assign it for the entire day or a specific time period, allowing you to consume the desired energy. Moreover, besides the clocks, there are also some covers available for customization. However, as you can notice, it doesn't provide a full screen mode with a dim background, nor does it enable us to download additional covers from any store. Therefore, the experience is somewhat more restricted. However, please note that it does indeed offer us a nice variety of analog clocks, digital clocks, and other options. Additionally, it includes the feature of edge lighting. Although it may not seem very attractive since there is no curved screen, it supposedly lights up on the edges to notify you of a message or something similar. Also, remember that on the main screen, you can swipe from the corner to reduce the size of the icon grid, allowing you to access some more easily. Though, the activation gesture might be somewhat tricky during your initial attempts, but I believe you will gradually become accustomed to it as you continue using it over time. Take a look right there. When you release your finger, you will enter into some of these applications. You have the option to configure whether you prefer to have an application drawer or if you want all the applications to appear on the same home screen. Additionally, you can choose the option to double tap on an empty space to lock the screen, which is something that proves to be quite useful as well. There is also an option known as Advanced Material, which enhances the blurring effect of folders. This feature greatly contributes to achieving a highly appealing aesthetic. It points out that there are various folders you can have organized in a fascinating manner. Besides this straightforward folder layout, you have the ability to enlarge the folder size. This means you don't need to open the folder first before accessing any of its contents. Instead, you can simply click directly on the icon to launch these applications. Therefore, these folders, I find their design and functionality to be quite nice. However, it's important to note that they are necessarily square. They also include some gestures, such as lifting the device to activate it or double tapping the screen to turn it on or off. These options, though, are disabled by default at the factory. On the lock screen, you'll notice that we have the ability to customize the shortcut available in the lower left corner. Additionally, the player on the lock screen will appear with a specific format, similar to that of notifications. This generation debuts a new quick settings panel, so you can combine the notifications or the quick settings panel into two pages. So you as a user can choose the classic layout or this new split layout. So if you swipe from the right area, you access the quick controls list, and from the left, you access the notifications. You have the change available also with a horizontal swipe. And of course, you can edit your entire list of quick controls to remove and put new controls completely to your liking. Remember that here can also appear controls from third-party applications that you install little by little. You can also disable the text labels in case you prefer a much cleaner setting, only showing the icons. And note that another interesting feature is the live alerts, which is a kind of capsule that will appear with an animation close to the camera. In the settings, it displays the compatible apps, which unfortunately isn't a very long list. Interestingly, it seems YouTube Music isn't supported, although the music player shows up in the control center, but not as a capsule. However, for Spotify, this option appears and provides additional controls like playback buttons and suggestions for other content. So it seems to me like this is a really good tool. However, I wish it were compatible with even more applications. A similar capsule will be shown when you are sharing the internet connection with other devices or when you record your screen, along with the timer, of course. But it would definitely be ideal to see this little capsule available in a greater variety of applications. Remember that OPPO also includes a smart sidebar from which you can have a temporary storage of some files, such as a kind of clipboard where you can drag and drop items. For instance, let's drag some pictures into this temporary storage. In this manner, I can continue adding more pictures that I want to send later. So imagine that now I open WhatsApp and simply in a conversation, we will access the temporary storage and notice that we can see several images or items here. By the way, these will be synchronizing across multiple OPPO devices, which is quite convenient. With the same account, you see, we have the ability to just drag and drop once more to send these pictures with a simple scroll. However, this intelligent sidebar not only includes this small clipboard, but it also provides access to the recent files section. This section features a filter for images or documents, allowing you to very easily send, for instance, a document via email. Now imagine you are in the process of writing it. You just release it, and that's it, making it more productive. In this sidebar, you can take screenshots, start a screen recording, or translate what's displayed. You can also open apps in floating window mode, but only one at a time. Fortunately, both YouTube and Instagram support this mode. When you combine it with a split screen mode, you can use up to 3 apps simultaneously. It's worth noting that transforming a traditional app into a floating or split screen app is quite simple. You just use the same gesture as closing the app, but instead you slide a little bit higher and that's it, you're done. For instance, let's open an application in split screen mode, just so you can see how we can have up to 3 apps running at the same time. Open apps on the same screen, and the split screen apps are in the recent apps list. Sadly, the one-handed mode is not ideal. It doesn't let us reach distant screen areas, just shifts the top to the bottom. This is one of my few complaints about this device. You can also take screenshots by swiping with 3 fingers, and you might even notice that you can easily capture screenshots with more content than the screen can display. Additionally, you have the option to take partial screenshots by holding 3 fingers on the screen and then scrolling to the desired area. And if that's not enough, there's also an option to quickly pixelate some of the content in case you want it to be seen with dots or squares, depending on your preference, and it's done easily. You might have the ability to censor certain content. Additionally, the device comes with various gestures for use. For instance, with the screen off, you could draw an NO to open the camera, or a CV for the flashlight. You can also set up specific shortcuts for other apps. Moreover, you can activate the flashlight by pressing and holding any button while the screen is off. It also supports on-air gestures, which are turned off by default because they consume a significant amount of battery. However, for example, you could answer calls with a gesture in front of the phone, or more usefully, scroll pages in apps. If you wash dishes, activate this to scroll by showing your hand to switch apps. However, recognition isn't as fast as I'd like compared to other devices I've tested. The experience is somewhat slower, but if it functions properly, it would indeed be compatible with YouTube, allowing you to put a video in full screen, although that option is used less frequently. Finally, there are additional gestures available to activate the device when you pick it up or to bring it directly to your ear, enabling you to answer calls without pressing any buttons or similar actions. Also, it's important to note that several applications support drag and drop gestures, as I demonstrated to you a few minutes earlier. It's also a great moment, but for example, something unusual is that it allows you to do the same on Instagram, where you can drag and drop any image that has been uploaded by someone you follow, and you already have it in the temporary storage to reuse it somewhere else. We will also find the traditional support sphere to support some gestures, or also to show more buttons and have them at your fingertips. And we discover the Zen space as a way to truly relax. In this scenario, you have the ability to tailor it according to your desired duration and other preferences. Once you grant the necessary permissions, keep in mind that it can be somewhat assertive. When you initiate a Zen session, you won't be able to exit it easily. It will mute all notifications and block any applications you haven't chosen to allow. Essentially, it serves as a mode designed to let you disconnect from the digital world and immerse yourself in tranquility. It includes an option to enhance your appearance in video calling apps, but it's only compatible with Teams and WhatsApp. Even though I have Zoom and Google Meet installed, the option isn't available there. An interesting note is that in the voice recorder, you can add photo marks. So, if you're recording a class and need a visual reference, you can easily press this button to attach a photo. You have the option to add a bookmark to your recording, allowing you to easily return to that specific moment when they discuss the photo you captured with just a tap. Actually, you can create bookmarks too, which is a feature more commonly found on other smartphones. However, attaching photos to bookmarks was something I hadn't encountered until now. Additionally, it includes a universal remote control app, and interestingly, it also features a compass and level up, which are not typically found on all smartphones. For your photos, you can press and hold on a person or object to save it in the temporary storage for later use. Additionally, you can create a GIF or a collage directly from the gallery. Speaking of the gallery, it comes with integrated backup through Google Photos should you want to connect your accounts. There's also an option, which is disabled by default, that you can activate if you want editing suggestions powered by artificial intelligence. For example, in this picture that, as you can see, is not so sharp, the device launches the suggestion to improve the quality with artificial intelligence. So this option can be useful for photographs with long-range zoom that suddenly do not have the quality that one would have liked, and really if it will give us a significant improvement. And another curious detail is found within the security suite, because it notes that there is a button to clean the speaker. Remember that this device resists water without too many problems, but after immersing it in water, it is always advisable to dry it and clean it, and with this option, the speaker will emit a loud sound to expel the water that may have been stored there. With regard to artificial intelligence functions, it brings a good suite of options that I tell you in detail in other content. In the description I leave that video here, just let me list its functions because it brings AI Studio to generate various images using artificial intelligence. It is also capable of recognizing your screen to translate it or extract other elements to the sidebar. The voice recorder offers accounts with transcription and summary features, which are particularly useful for lengthy meetings or similar situations. In the Notes app, you'll discover an excellent artificial intelligence assistant that lets you modify the format of your written text, simplify or clean it up, polish it, and even elaborate more on the text that. It also features a translator that you can use not only to translate, but also to shorten text, change the tone, and utilize other tools. This translator is accessible through the sidebar. The innovation compared to other OPPO devices is that in this instance, it clearly leverages the foldable nature of the device. This means it can translate the content you view through the car, or it can offer a live translation feature. For instance, right now I'm speaking in Spanish, and it is promptly displaying the translation on the screen for you to see what I am expressing in English. Additionally, it provides you the option to save the entire session's translation, should you find it necessary. Moreover, there's an alternative conversation mode that enables us to fully utilize the advantages of a foldable device. Pay attention. On the back side, it displays what is being said in a different language, while on the inside it shows the native language. So notice that as I'm speaking Spanish, the screen ought to display the content in English. Just like that, you could engage in a face-to-face translation with someone else by taking advantage of the foldable screen. The recognition isn't very fast, so you need to go phrase by phrase to ensure a better experience. However, as you noticed, it works correctly, although it requires an internet connection. Let's say that is its weakest point compared to what Samsung offers, as Samsung's translation doesn't consume any internet connection. Using the document application, this device can also summarize documents or translate them with the help of artificial intelligence. Additionally, it has a feature intended to assist in responding to messages using AI. However, it appears that this function isn't operating correctly, similar to what we've observed in OnePlus devices and some text entry applications. Note that the AI writer will also be available. You can write a short paragraph, and it'll expand it, even detecting screen content. Plus, if you're on a web page, it can summarize or read aloud. The gallery also offers an AI editor with added options, and an update will bring a new content search feature. The OPPO Find N5 will support natural language on your phone, although for now it will only work in English. That is still under development. Evidently, they will also support Circle to search from Google to hold down and then lock anything we want to search for on the internet. Although it seems to conflict when you have here the taskbar, that will be something they will have to correct. And of course, we will also find Gemini, which is available on every Android device to chat as if you were with. If you have a friend or someone like that, you can just press this button to start the conversation. This feature is available on all Android devices, so it isn't exclusive, but many users might not know about it. I am doing a video review of the OPPO Find N5. I would like you to share what your favorite feature of this phone is. That's quite fascinating. The OPPO Find N is equipped with a number of remarkable features. Its compact size and lightweight design make it extremely comfortable and easy to handle with just one hand. Enough is enough. I asked for one feature. Sure, my favorite feature is its 50-megapixel main camera, capturing detailed photos. Okay, thank you very much for your participation in this video. You can say goodbye to the audience. You're welcome. It was a pleasure to share my thoughts on the OPPO Find N. I hope your video succeeds. See you later. And now, let's proceed to discuss the characteristics of a foldable device. Pay attention to how the applications will keep running when you are using them on the external screen, and then you unfold the cell phone. The same situation can occur when you do the opposite action. By default, it turns off, but if you slide up, it instantly resumes. This is, without a doubt, the best setup I have encountered in foldable devices. In contrast, some others either immediately resume or alternatively, they just turn off right away. The display. OPPO provides an intermediate setup. If you decide not to continue using it, you just avoid touching the screen. However, if you wish to keep using it, simply slide up and you're all set. Regardless of your choice, in the settings menu, you have the option to select whether you want it to instantly continue or turn off right away. Additionally, there is a section available to adjust the display size for certain applications, especially if they don't adapt well when the screen is shown in its format. Square. Plus, there are certain apps that are specifically optimized for use in a kind of double window format. However, even if some apps don't appear in this list, take note that, for instance, the Settings app itself shows up in 2 columns to efficiently utilize the space. The same scenario will occur with the Notes app, and even the Contacts or Messages app will also display in this manner. The gallery also allows you to make excellent use of space with 2 columns, and the same applies to the Files app. This results in a well-optimized and mature operating system, fully utilizing all the capabilities of such a large screen. Even the voice recorder is optimized in 2 columns. Third-party apps will obviously include, among many others, Telegram or WhatsApp. All of these apps also operate with this same view, which significantly enhances your experience. Productivity. Interestingly, even Gmail supports this, although Gmail curiously prompts you to rotate the device to activate this 2-pane view. However, it functions well. Additionally, if you're interested in having multiple applications open, the device offers excellent capabilities. Observe that utilizing the taskbar, you can swipe the app towards the center, effectively splitting the screen in 2. Remarkably, the screen can also be divided into 3 sections with a smart view that optimizes space for application use. Next, observe that, by default, it appears to display 2 apps in full size, and you tap to scroll between them. However, by swiping with 4 fingers, you can zoom to have all 3 apps open simultaneously. This implementation, in my opinion, is spectacular and looks quite advanced. Interestingly, it doesn't allow you to combine this 3-app view with a floating window view. Instead, it requires you to replace any one of the that are already open. But undoubtedly, the taskbar is another one of these highly useful elements, as it enables you to seamlessly switch between various applications in a very swift manner. Notice that they even remain linked in certain cases if you are using multiple applications simultaneously. In fact, you also have a dedicated button to open up the complete list of applications and launch any of them without needing to return to the home screen or something similar. This feature provides you with a remarkably high level of productivity. You now also have direct access to recent files once more, which makes it easy for you to drag and drop. This taskbar has 2 distinct modes. It can be entirely fixed with a small size, or it can also be available in a floating format. By default, this floating format is hidden. But if you scroll just a bit to the side of the center, you will reveal this small bar once again. When you enter any other application, you'll find that you can utilize the space a little more efficiently. I find this to be a very smart feature, and this is something that at the very least Samsung has not done up until now, so I really love seeing these kinds of new features in OPPO devices. In this smart dock, we have a list of apps that we use on the main screen, and then on the right side we can see the recent apps. Now let's take a moment to also discuss the flex mode, which observes and takes advantage of the fold in the screen. For instance, on the camera, the viewfinder is moved to the top, allowing you to use this same device as a kind of back to base, and you have the option to take pictures or record some video. Actually, if you plan to use it in this manner to capture things located on the top, it includes another button that shifts the viewfinder to the center of the bottom screen, allowing you to display the content perfectly. Moreover, it incorporates an additional button here, enabling us to utilize the screen space efficiently. For instance, when taking pictures, you can quickly glance at the result before capturing one. Another photo, there's also a button to activate the back screen, giving the person you're photographing a preview of the shot. As mentioned, you have an option to take a selfie with all controls on the external screen. Don't worry about holding the internal screen. It has a lock that needs you to swipe up to switch back to the internal screen to make use of this screen. And something that really indicates that OPPO is performing well in optimizing its system is that even other native applications are going to adjust accordingly when we utilize this small fold. There are other foldables that do not appear to have any kind of change when the device is in this state, so I must insist OPPO is doing an outstanding job. By the way, if you slide down with 2 fingers, it splits the screen, allowing you to open any other app you desire. in a split-screen format. Notice that the clock app has an adapted view, although interestingly WhatsApp doesn't adapt like Samsung's Galaxy Z Fold 6. However, watch if Zoom adapts. It depends on the app you use. Interestingly, Google Meet doesn't adapt either, which is curious since both WhatsApp and Google Meet do, just on the Galaxy Z Fold 6. But hey, it's quite an interesting detail to consider. When it comes to video applications, it's important to note that YouTube, if it is optimized and you have the premium version, offers some additional controls. You can play your content perfectly, although I must say I don't like that it keeps the status bar, which steals some important space. However, for instance, Netflix and Disney Plus have this adaptation that doesn't take this space into account, so they really take advantage of the screen area to play your movies or videos in this manner, making for a much better viewing experience. You won't need to recharge your cell phone on another stand or anything similar. Ideally, controls should move to the lower area, but in this case they stay on the main screen. If you believe Samsung had better optimization by default, let me explain that on Amazon Prime, this device does adapt the content, whereas interestingly the Galaxy Z Fold 6 does not. It's quite unusual, but what should be noted is that Samsung allows you to force applications to operate in the center of the screen, but OPPO does not do this. So, for instance, in applications like Max or VIX, you'll observe that the content fails to adjust and there's no option to enforce it. That's something I would have appreciated being available here as well. However, you can certainly observe an evolution in the OPPO operating system, which is gradually beginning to utilize the capabilities of a fully foldable device. Regarding security, this device will incorporate a side fingerprint reader. Even though it is rather thin, it functions effectively. We can store up to 5 fingerprints, and you'll notice that simply placing and removing your finger results in quick recognition with excellent accuracy. Additionally, facial unlocking is included here, but it operates only in 2 dimensions, which makes it less secure. The device itself even warns you about this. However, if you wish, you can still register your face for quicker unlocking, although I must emphasize it might be bypassed with more ease. Interestingly, the device includes a smart notification hiding feature, which can display notifications only to you and hide them when someone else is looking at your phone. However, interestingly enough, you need to re-enter the face, which is a bit odd, but anyway, it's one of those features aiming to provide you with a slightly more private experience indeed. In this particular case, it's important to note that the registration process is done using different face profiles, which is different from the facial unlock feature. Additionally, in the file manager, there is a private safe that is very well encrypted. You can access it using your fingerprint, and here you have the ability to safeguard everything you consider to be private. Also, take note that if you delete any content in the file manager, there is a recently deleted section which by default allows you to enter. Without needing any password at all, however, you could choose to block this access by using fingerprint or facial recognition. The device also comes with a payment protection option for more sensitive applications. It enhances security by disabling USB data transfer to prevent any potential attacks. Additionally, it includes app locking, allowing you to decide which apps should require a second verification before permitting access. You also have the option to hide applications from the home screen, and additionally, you have the application cloner feature. This allows you to use 2 separate accounts for these applications on the same phone. In fact, you can add practically any application you want. There's also a system cloner if you're looking for something even more advanced. It's important to note that this is almost like switching to a different cell phone. You can even have a different unlock pattern. In this case, the clone space has its own set of completely separate applications. The primary space allows you to simply switch at the time of locking and unlocking by using a different pattern, and it will transition to another space. Additionally, there is a kids mode available, where you have the option to select which applications can be accessed and for what duration. It also provides alerts regarding ambient light, poor posture, or when viewing content from an inadequate distance. Moreover, you can activate the blue light filter for added protection. So, kids enjoy a secure experience here because they are unable to log into other things you haven't authorized. Obviously, to log out, they need to verify, and it's the same process for accessing parental controls. When sharing pictures, remember that you can click this option to remove the location and additional metadata. Also, from the gallery, you have the option to change the pictures to private items. It also features a repair mode, which thankfully lets you block your cell phone's contents temporarily during repairs. While it doesn't include a private VPN, it collaborates with Avast to scan for any malware, along with Google Play Protect, Of course, it will also have all the security features from Google's suite found in other Android devices, including extended unlocking and many additional features. In the description below, I provide a link for you where you can find detailed information about each of these features that are available in all Android devices. This will allow you to fully enjoy your device with all the options it offers. The battery has provided a great experience with a capacity of 5600 mAh. It's a silicon carbon battery, and as I've mentioned in other reviews, this new technology sometimes didn't meet my expectations. However, this one is an exception. This device performs excellently, offering longer battery life than the average smartphone, which is surprising for a foldable device. During my test, attempting to discharge the device as quickly as possible, it lasted over 5 hours, whereas devices in traditional formats typically last about 4 hours and 15 minutes, even when the battery drainer runs in the background. While watching videos in the foreground, I noticed it lacks significant optimization as the difference isn't very pronounced. In that test, it achieved 5 hours and 20 minutes, indicating that the software might still require further optimization to improve. The battery is very low, so things that are running in the background do not consume as much power. You manually shut down what you are not using to help the battery last longer. This test was with the device folded, using only the external screen, but doing the same test with the device unfolded, obviously the battery will perform less. Trying to discharge the cell phone as fast as possible achieved almost 4H, which is not bad considering we were using a significantly wider screen and performing the test in the background. It reached 4 hours and 10 minutes. Once again, the difference wasn't that significant. In the new test, where we're playing YouTube videos with the screen brightness set at 50%, it lasted for 23 hours and 26 minutes, starting from a full charge at 100% until the phone completely powered off. Trust me, that's an exceptionally high performance. When compared to other smartphones with batteries exceeding 5000 mAh in traditional formats, this phone demonstrates remarkable capabilities. It seems that its screen also has an efficient material that does not consume so much energy, so the battery experience has left me very satisfied, which is very strange being a foldable. We must make a special emphasis on that, because despite being foldable, it gave a superior performance to what other devices in traditional format give. Incredible. In addition to that, you have the power saving mode, which will surely also help prevent unwanted consumption in the background, and similar things, Ultra Saver mode for emergencies. When you're low on battery, it's useful to restrict more content and more app execution, so both of those things are available here. Another very good news is that the charger is included in the box, and it's an 80-watt charger, although watch out chat, it never reaches 80% watts. During the load test that we conducted, using the default settings at 15 minutes, it reached 28%. At 30 minutes, it increased to 53%, and the full charge was completed at 64 minutes. The peak power it received was 40 watts. Although it consistently maintained a relatively stable power, high, so it charged quickly. But when one reads 80 watts, you imagine a much more powerful charge than it actually was. Having smart fast charging turned on, he notes that he wasn't able to get to 80 watts either. His maximum peak was 41%, so consider it to have 45 watts fast charging, not 80. And in this case, there was not that much difference. If there was the first 15 min, because it got up to 34, in 30 min it got up to 64, and so even here there's still a marked difference. If you're going to be able to charge faster with this option on for the first half hour, however, the complete charging process was finished in 57 minutes, which is a time very similar to when this mode is not used. Therefore, fast charging does not appear to be particularly attractive. The device also supports 50 watts wireless charging, although with its own standard, so you must buy a charger designed specifically for this, although it can also charge with other standards such as Qi, which is the most popular, but obviously it will not charge up to 50 watts of power, and you have to consider that it does not come with magnet, so the wireless charger will not stay attached to the cell phone, but you have to place it very accurately so that it charges fast. It will also have reverse wireless charging, so you can place an accessory on the back of the cell phone and give them energy, or even your friend's cell phone, if in an emergency it ran out of battery and supports wireless charging. You can also place it on your back, although the charge is obviously slow. So we are going to focus a lot on emergencies and to take care of the degradation of the battery. It has smart charging to prevent fast charging if left connected too long, and charge lock to keep it plugged in, charging only to 80%. Everything about the battery seems positive to me. The charging speed wasn't as satisfying, but overall it charges well. In terms of connectivity, we will also feature a highly comprehensive system. It includes 5 grams and Wi-Fi 7, enabling extremely fast download speeds. Additionally, it has built-in data blocking settings to prevent unwanted app consumption and can connect to the internet solely through Wi-Fi. Furthermore, it supports eSIM, allowing you to add various plans, data via QR codes. Instead of purchasing physical SIM cards, which offers a much more modern experience, it is very useful when traveling and includes Bluetooth version 5.4 as well as NFC for making mobile payments. However, it lacks an FM radio, which is expected in a device with these features, but you can still connect accessories using the USB-C port. Moreover, it features advanced wireless screen projection, allowing you to, for instance, hide notifications to maintain your privacy or project with the screen turned off. To avoid consuming too much power on your cell phone, you can even project a single application while continuing to use other apps on your phone, showcasing its advanced capabilities. Moreover, it supports wired screen projection, but only in a mirrored format. It's important to mention that it lacks a desktop mode, unlike Samsung phones, Honor phones, or some Huawei models. OPPO, however, still does not offer this feature in any of its models. This is a specific development to take advantage of the cell phone's capabilities. I forgot to tell you that the USB port is 3.1 Gen 2, they have a good data transfer, and of course it is compatible with Android Auto. In the sensors, we will also find good news because it has accelerometer, field sensor, geomagnetic orientation, gyroscope, and proximity sensor is physical, something that is very much appreciated to avoid inconsistencies and all that. In fact, it actually includes infrared capabilities, allowing it to function as a universal remote control. This means you can operate TVs, air conditioners, cameras, and various other devices with it. As you can observe, the connectivity experience offered by this device is indeed very comprehensive and complete. Cell phone, even as a foldable, where generally space is very valuable and they can get to sacrifice some things. In the ecosystem, I think OPPO has very good points and points where it needs to improve. While it has a good catalog of accessories such as its OPPO Enco or OPPO Band and OPPO Watch, as well as the OPPO Pad, they do not seem to have an exaggeratedly advanced interaction. In fact, OPPO tablets are not so widely distributed in many markets, although they do allow you to use the cell phone from the tablet and some similar things. However, their watch interaction isn't very advanced, and there's just a single model available in Mexico. And there's not much variety. I think here OPPO needs to work much more to offer more variety of accessories to its users and that they perceive a much more complete ecosystem. Fortunately, it offers good technologies to interact with devices from other brands. Because, for example, OPPO does not have a laptop, but it has a technology called Multi-Screen Connect that can be connected to computers with. Windows function by cable or from wireless form, which allows you to take advantage of more capabilities such as transferring files or using the cell phone from your computer, among other features. Additionally, it includes a technology referred to as contact interactions. This is quite similar to what we observe with Apple, where you bring two cell phones close together to transfer data, although in this case the phones must be from OPPO to transfer contact information or similar things. Moreover, another exclusive feature available between OPPO phones, although they also share technology with Realme and OnePlus, is the function Beacon Link, which allows you to make calls even when you have no mobile signal. This is especially useful, for example, in a campground or somewhere where there is no signal. You are going to use Bluetooth to make the call. So you have a bit of a limited range, but at least you won't have to be shouting and you can maintain a good level of communication. If you use a Mac, there's very good news because OPPO has developed an app called OPPO Connect that doesn't come in the App Store. So you need to download it from connect.oppo.com. Additionally, you will have to configure it, and this process can be somewhat tedious. This is particularly true because Mac requires numerous permissions, so you'll need to authorize screen recording, accessibility permissions, microphone permissions, and automation permissions. However, once you have configured all these settings, the application will enable you to transfer files between the two devices in a way that is much simpler than what you could achieve with other devices. Android. This is a very important development that greatly improves the ecosystem experience. Interestingly, with Mac, there is also a remote desktop mode that allows you to control your entire computer directly from your mobile. And even thanks to its folding, in Flex mode, the trackpad control appears in the middle of the screen, offering an interesting experience. A simple button lets you deploy the full keyboard to control the computer. This Flex mode makes it feel like you're using a laptop remotely controlling your Mac. Interestingly, Windows does not have this feature available yet, although it will be added soon. Currently, what you can use on Windows is Multi-Screen Connect. However, you need to install a separate client for it. This feature makes it easier to transfer files, allowing you to drag and drop or even control your phone directly from the computer. However, these are separate tools, meaning that features like controlling the phone from the computer are not included. On Mac, it's only available on Windows. Additionally, this same application, or Plus Connect, can be installed on an iPhone, allowing you to transfer files wirelessly between the iPhone and this device. In fact, when you press the share button, the Send to iPhone option will appear. After installing the application on the iPhone, you don't even need to have it open. You can just bring the cell phones together, press the open button, and authorize the connection. However, you must enable location permissions for this app along with certain storage permissions on the iPhone, but that's just the initial step. Once you're going to use it, after that just press the button to authorize the connection, and that's all there is to it. Actually, it also keeps the XDR properties, ensuring the photos appear very nice. Realistically, moving photos between OPPO and iPhone in either direction gives one. It gives a very premium feeling in this sense, unlike just sending photos to WhatsApp, where they get compressed and lose a lot of quality, or using similar tools. That's why I emphasize that even though OPPO doesn't provide its own computer, it does at least offer some tools to enhance the user's experience. However, everything needs to be configured manually, which means that for users who might not be very experienced, the overall experience might not be as positive. And obviously, being an Android, it also incorporates all the Google ecosystem services like QuickShare, Google FastPair, Google Drive, Google Home, and others. Although OPPO is trying to offer some services, as an application called MyOppo, where you have a bit of technical support and its own app store called App Market to not depend 100% of Google Play Store, although it is clear that in many ways it will depend on Google because OPPO does not have its own cloud, at least not globally, nor its own application to control home devices or many other things. I insist OPPO seems to be growing little by little, but it still has a long way to go to perfect its ecosystem. Let's proceed to our test of opening applications to evaluate the performance of this device. It integrates the Snapdragon 8 Elite processor, but in a version with 7 cores. This means it has 1 core fewer, specifically from the less powerful cores. However, remember that this processor essentially lacks weak cores. Let's just say that they've removed a core from the less powerful cluster. Let's take a closer look to determine if the lack of a core impacts its performance significantly. Interestingly, in terms of battery life, it appears to have been beneficial. On average, it took about 8 seconds to launch each application, which definitely indicates a very positive performance. It doesn't seem that having a slightly trimmed processor compared to what we typically see in other devices affects it too much. You can note that it will maintain very good fluidity. Additionally, the 16 gigabytes of RAM it possesses seem to be more than sufficient to provide an excellent experience. A remarkably smooth experience, even when multiple applications are open simultaneously. It is important to mention that the RAM memory is SLPDDRX, which makes it exceptionally fast. This significantly contributes to the ability to open applications swiftly, ensuring that even in the event of a reboot, it doesn't take too long to resume and provide you with the application experience. It's worth noting that even when navigating within the applications, we don't encounter any freezing at any point. Additionally, in applications that load multimedia content such as videos or images, note that we don't see any moments where it freezes. So really the performance is up to what one expects in a device of this price. In fact, note that in addition to the 16 gigabyte of physical RAM memory, it has virtual RAM memory with 12 GB, which seems to me very exaggerated considering that it already has a very good amount of physical RAM memory. But hey, it is available and turned on by default. One very positive aspect is that it comes with 512 gigabytes of storage. In this case, when you compare it with the Samsung alternative, there is indeed a 512 gigabyte option available, but it is even more expensive. So this device becomes quite appealing, especially in terms of storage, which is UFS 4.0. However, let's proceed to conduct a specific test on the read speed of the storage. It is noted that it falls quite short compared to what we've observed in other devices, although this also could potentially be part of some system management or something similar. However, at least in this specific test, it doesn't seem to provide us with a good read speed, nor does it appear to give us such an attractive write speed, especially when considering the very high price point it carries. But let's move on to a real-life test. Let's consider this video and export it in 4K. Remember, it has a total duration of 1 min using clips recorded with this cell phone in 4K. And there you have it. It took 16s, demonstrating to us that it has a very good speed. So even though in the storage write and read speed test it doesn't appear to have been that appealing, overall the user experience is going to be quite positive. For games, it has a dedicated application that observes and ensures we manage all the content we have installed. We can even access the screenshots we have taken, although we need to give permission beforehand. Additionally, we can enable or disable the extra toolbox that appears when gaming. You can also set calls to auto-answer via speakerphone while playing and adjust notification styles, which we'll see soon. It includes an auto brightness lock to stop changes when sensors are covered during play and offers vibration D, but only for certain games, which I don't have. It also features a quick launch option, allowing games to be cached, so the next time you run them, they open even faster. Additionally, it includes an esports mode that optimizes the entire system with just one touch, minimizing interruptions and enhancing performance, which is particularly beneficial for gamers. Lastly, it offers an HDR option specifically designed for PUBG, and those are more or less the options available in the settings. However, let's run a game and you'll notice that when accessing any of these contents, the sidebar appears. Here, we find the frames per second counter as well as the performance profile. This is useful in case we want to prioritize either performance or battery saving. Additionally, a Spotify control will appear if you use this application to listen to music or podcasts. Moreover, you'll also see the brightness control. Then, with one touch, we activate the championship mode I mentioned earlier. Here, you can change notification styles. By default, notifications appear as a bubble and you can dismiss them. You can also adjust the style to be less intrusive with bullets and configure speed, opacity, and the maximum number of notifications at once. For instance, notice that a notification is appearing here, and it operates without significantly disrupting the game. Also, observe that if multiple messages arrive, several strips will appear, which is far less interruptive compared to the usual notification balloon style. Additionally, you have the option to block incoming calls, and you can capture screenshots, make screen recordings, and optimize the network to minimize latency. Furthermore, you can enhance the touch response to improve the response speed. In gestures, additionally, you can lock the orientation and enable quick launch. There are also filters for available games, and you can change your voice if the game supports chat through the microphone. Finally, it includes a system status monitor, allowing you to constantly keep an eye on the frames per second, GPU consumption, and CPU consumption. Moreover, it offers an option to dim the screen while the game is downloading content to help save battery life. It lets you adjust the volume and make GPU tweaks. For detailed options, it's best to keep defaults, but for those who like tweaking, this device offers possibilities. Also, you can open apps in a floating format to reply to messages, or something similar without the need to leave your game. But let's go to the test in Call of Duty. By default, it gives us the very high graphic quality at a maximum. Frame rate, we can also raise the maximum quality or raise the frame rate to an ultra level, but it lowers the graphic quality. It should be noted the good compatibility of this processor with a large number of effects, including also the experimental functions, so that in graphical issues you will find an excellent experience. Of course, if you prioritize the frame rate, some effects might not be available, so it really depends on your personal preference. Initially, we prioritize graphic quality, and the performance turned out to be almost perfect. You'll notice it manages the temperature effectively, preventing any uncomfortable overheating. Interestingly, on this device, when you record the screen, the game is almost always displayed at 60 frames per second. But interestingly, when you're on the motorcycle and it's time to turn, you notice a movement that's much less fluid than 60 frames per second. It's just an interesting observation, which I assume is due to optimization issues that could be improved with an update. However, generally speaking, the performance is excellent while playing, with near-perfect stability and effective temperature control. And then we prioritized the refresh rate, and once more, the performance was nearly flawless. Although it doesn't maintain its graphics at a constant 100%, it only drops to around 88, which is still exceptionally good. However, similar to what we observed in the earlier test when riding the motorcycle, the screen recording might exhibit some slightly odd behavior. But it's a minor detail that you would likely only notice if you were recording a gameplay session. Then we played Asphalt, and of course we set the graphic quality to the highest possible level to provide a very challenging test for this device. Interestingly, in this scenario, it did not exceed more than 60 frames per second. In that regard, it disappoints, although it still maintains an almost perfect performance. The lowest frame rate it reached was 58 frames per second. However, other devices, even those that are more affordable and use the Snapdragon 8 Elite, are capable of reaching 120 frames per second on similar settings. This game might slightly disappoint the most demanding, though the experience is still very good and temperature control is maintained. An interesting detail is rotating the phone before starting the game for better deployment. We ran Henshin Impact and set the graphics to the highest. By default it's already high, but we raised it to 60 frames per second, and more demanding tasks were handled excellently by this game, performing very well with impressive temperature control. This is remarkable given it's a folding device with limited cooling space, yet it maintains a near-perfect experience for heavy content. It's important to note this device's excellent temperature control, crucial for a folding device with limited cooling space. Still, it offers a near-perfect experience for heavy tasks, although as a side note, the fact that playing on a square screen might lessen the viewing range to the sides, which is particularly noticeable in the gaming world, where ultra-wide monitors are often favored. In this case, we have a nearly square display that could be quite uncomfortable for some gamers. Next, we played War Thunder, one of the games that is most demanding in terms of graphics. By default, it is set to high quality, but we decided to turn it up to the maximum in all settings, including ray tracing. We aim to achieve the highest possible performance along with the most advanced anti-aliasing. Interestingly, during our testing phase, the game performed quite well. In fact, similar to other games, the frames per second counter in the game displayed a higher number than what our monitor showed us. However, we observed an intriguing occurrence. There was a point when the frame rate was capped at 30 frames per second, although after some time it increased back to 60 frames per second. So, well, it is quite clear that the behavior is somewhat strange. However, I insist that this game is quite complex in its graphics, and in general, it showed us a very good performance in this content. Then we played Kark Street, and once again, for a very complicated test, we turned everything up to the maximum in its graphic settings with no limit on frames per second. Just like the last game, we noticed a heating higher than what we had noticed in all the previous games, but still, the performance was good. Was truly excellent. The game appears very fluid and stable. Even when recording your screen, it doesn't seem to lose fluidity, which is excellent for these types of games. However, it should be noted that this test was conducted on a different day than the previous tests, so the device was relatively cool before starting. Even so, it still reached up to 45.7 degrees Celsius. Therefore, I believe the best approach would be to play at a somewhat lower graphics quality to prevent excessive heating, but it definitely shows very good capabilities. And finally, we played Bright Memory, one of the most complex games we have tested around here, and again we turned everything up to the highest that this device allowed us, which anyway in some cases says medium or low level. But it is the highest possible setting, and in this case the stability was not so good, as it notes that at times again went down to 30 frames per second, then back up to 60 frames per second. Secondly, it appears that the device prioritizes maintaining a stable experience to prevent numerous fluctuations. Thus, if it becomes excessively hot, it might limit its performance to avoid showing you too many simultaneous ups and downs. In this context, if you observe that it is a device that may lack adequate cooling, it reached a temperature of 45.3 degrees Celsius during our test. The performance was 44 frames per second on average, which suggests it falls slightly short compared to other premium devices. In my opinion, it isn't entirely a 100% device meant for gaming. This is mostly due to the square shape of the unfolded screen, which might cause the buttons to appear more crowded than we would prefer. In conclusion, we are in front of one of the best foldable today, not only for its design that breaks the barrier between a folding device, one traditional format device, because it is very thin and very light, plus it does not sacrifice resistance, but also for all aspects in general. It has good screen, the sound considering that it is a folding is fine, the front camera is very bad, but being a folding, I remind you that you can use the main system. For selfies and more, and greatly improves the video recording, I think it is a pending issue that will still have to improve with updates. It is not bad, but if it falls short, however, the battery life is spectacular, the charging speed is also positive, has reversible wireless charging. Despite being so thin, the software is gradually maturing, offering good options, although it still falls short, lower than it might reach. Samsung offers you in some ways a great performance experience. The gaming experience is quite good, especially given the limited space for cooling. It's a highly competitive foldable device that can hold its ground without a doubt. Questions for Galaxy Z Fold 6? So, for now, we have reached the conclusion of this video. I sincerely hope that you liked it. If you haven't already, tell us, and we'll see you later.